Parasite Eve is an action role-playing, survival horror game developed by Square Enix, then Squaresoft, in 1998 and made available for the Sony PlayStation. The game acts as a sequel to the novel of the same name written by Hideaki Senna, and stars Aya Brea, a member of the New York City Police Department who spends the next 6 days trying to stop a monster named Eve from making a creature who will end the world in 1997. 1997 was a hell of a year. Make sure to pack plenty of ice because we're diving into Parasite Eve. As you can expect from the genre, Parasite Eve combines elements of RPGs and survival horror games into one complete package. On the RPG side of things, you still have your levels, stats, and annoying random battles that I still to this day can't understand how anyone ever tolerated their bullshit. But at least they fight on the same screen, so they have that going for it. On the survivor horror side of things, you have disgusting, somewhat horrifying creatures to face, and no partners. That right, you have to face the threat of danger alone. Meaning you use your own potions, and you watch your own back. This makes fighting a little harder than usual, but can be made easier knowing what weapons work best for you. Despite being action-focused, the battle system still operates with the use of an ATB, action time battle, gauge you have to wait to fill up before you can attack. But you have full control of your character at all times. Meaning you can run around and dodge incoming attacks. However, you revert back to a traditional, stand perfectly still, turn-based form whenever you launch an attack. Be careful, because enemies can move around too and sometimes are faster than you. You want to avoid their attack, but in certain areas the field is so cramped it's nearly impossible to avoid them and you end up getting hit. There are several types of guns you can get along your journey. Some have 2 shots they can fire in a row, some have 3. Other weapons can fire at multiple enemies at complete random, which comes in handy when you find yourself surrounded. If you run out of bullets, you can always whack things with a club. Depending on the range of the weapon, the closer you are to a target, the more damage you'll be able to inflict. You also have parasite energy that acts in place of magic from other games. This grows the more you level up and gives you ways to heal, cast barrier, haste, and remove poison from your body without needing an item to help you. Haste is especially helpful when fighting a certain Spider-Woman. Get your web off me, you goddamn bitch. Parasite Eve is a bit more limited in its location than most RPGs around this time period. Instead of an open world map, you have a couple of areas you can visit as each day passes. The further into the game you get, the more places you have to explore, so that fact hasn't changed. It's just nowhere near the openness as other RPGs, but this can be explained by the survival horror aspect, which is all about enclosing you into specific areas to create that horror environment. And not just because it thinks it's an action game in disguise. On the story side of things, Parasite Eve has a very science fiction meet fantasy nature to it. Added in with a touch of mystery as you're compelled to find out more about the villain and what she's doing to the people in New York. And it all begins at the opera. The story takes place around Christmas, and revolves around Aya, who you can name whatever, and Eve, a being created from the consciousness of the mitochondria DNA in the body of Melissa Pierce, mutating her into the form we see throughout the game. What does she want? To destroy the human race. I mean, what else would you do right before Christmas? It doesn't just end there. Eve can also manipulate the mitochondria in all of us, and with her goal being the death of humanity, how does she go about doing that? By spontaneous human combustion. Everyone, but Aya, who proves to be immune to Eve's powers and is capable of entering areas where she's present where others would just burn alive or be turned to slime. I'm not sure which is worse. How they explain the mitochondria's involvement and the interaction between Aya and Eve throughout the game is interesting to watch. Aya gets a good degree of character development when she starts to worry she's every bit of a monster as Eve is because of her immunity. She works through her fear and stays on the straight and narrow to defeat Eve before she can destroy humanity. There's some good build-up with Aya seeing a little girl from day one, and continues to appear the further into the game you get. It has a very good payoff that makes sense with everything it was leading up to, but I'm not going to spoil it for those like me who may want to go out and play the game for the first time after all these years. I'll just say it's an intriguing little subplot and the twist makes sense. We also have a strong support character in the form of Daniel, an African-American police officer who is a divorcee and has a son named Ben, who he fought for custody for and has a strained relationship with given the work schedule of a cop. Those in the police force or have seen enough crime dramas know what I'm talking about. Daniel draws several parallels to Barrett from Final Fantasy VII, but a lot more watered down than Barrett. All in his mannerisms and how he carries himself. He's a loyal friend who doesn't like sitting around doing paperwork when there's a monster that needs slaying, and would risk literally being set on fire to save his little boy. Just the whole scene with Daniel agonizing over not being able to do anything while having to let Aya find Ben was heartbreaking. The thing is, I can't tell if the similarities were on purpose to benefit from the popularity of Final Fantasy VII, since the graphics are also kind of similar, and even Aya looks like a female Cloud before we got a female Cloud, or if Square really does only have 3 strings they play when it comes to their black characters. But to their credit, Kiros and Saz, from Final Fantasy VIII and XIII respectively, were pretty different from Barrett and Daniel. This brings me back to the graphics. While the cutscenes don't look too bad, the in-game one looks... well, let's be honest, it looks like shit. You wouldn't have batted an eyelash at it in 1998, but man have we come a long way in the graphics department since then. The early days of 3D graphics, my friend. It was a hard time on everyone. Unless you were the Nintendo 64, apparently. The overall style is kind of a cross between Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. Like a transition period, if you will, which makes sense considering the game came out between those two. I like the style well enough and it serves its purpose, giving you a Final Fantasy feel while being its own thing. Parasite Eve does what I didn't think possible before. Take the best that RPG and survival horror has to offer and present it with the magic of Square soft styles in the 90s for everyone to enjoy. While it may not be the scariest survival horror game you'll play, it's definitely one of the more memorable ones. Get it?